Alright, Borderlands 3 is here, and this time around I want to do a first impressions video rather quickly before really taking my time with the official review. Let's get one thing out of the way right off the bat here: the game is getting review bombed right now, for reasons other than the actual design and gameplay. The Metacritic user scores are tanking for a variety of different reasons, ranging from epic exclusivity to the many controversies of Randy Pitchford, and even the treatment of YouTuber Supmato by the game's publisher Take-Two, or the ridiculous DRM policies being utilized which only end up harming the end user experience. All of these things are valid criticism. However, if we isolate the game for what it is and disregard most of the surrounding controversy, it's not as bad as the user scores make it out to be. At least, not to me, it's not. That being said, it's not that great. Keep in mind, this isn't my official review. That will take much longer given the nature of the game and the time required to properly play enough material to truly judge the title. But first impressions, it's not going to live up to the hype. At this point, we should establish a core principle of this video. There are two ways to look at Borderlands 3. The first is to expect and desire, simply put, more Borderlands. Many fans fall into this category, and all they wanted out of the title was an extension on what they already had with Borderlands 2, which is exactly what they are getting. The second position is expecting innovation, or some form of further building on the concept. This, so far, does not appear to have happened. If you sat me down with no knowledge of Borderlands 3 and the multi-year hype-building development cycle surrounding it, put some gameplay on the screen, and told me it was DLC footage from Borderlands 2 in 2013, I would easily and immediately believe you. This is where we run into a problem, however, because to some, that's a good thing, and to others, it's not. If you went into this expecting and hoping for an experience as close as humanly possible to Borderlands 2 without taking risks or making drastic changes, you will likely be extremely satisfied. However, if you came in hoping for some of the previous systems to be improved, developed further, or updated to be in line with the current industry norms, you might be disappointed. This lack of updated gameplay mechanics can be taken as either a positive or a negative. I won't tell anyone how to feel, but right alongside that is a failure to improve on the part of technical polish. I am personally playing on console out of a desire to avoid the Epic Game Store, and I can tell you right now, the performance is bad. There is crazy, horrible, and ultimately frustrating menu lag. There are FPS issues, stutters, and at times a borderline unplayable level of performance that subtracts greatly from the overall experience. With that said, some might expect that the PC version is substantially better. This is not the case. From my research, I have seen that there are severe DirectX 12 issues. The PC version is also grappling with the heavy DRM de novo mechanics, which has upload speed implications attached to it, and is generally a very unfavorable addition to any game. The culmination of these factors is a game that is not running well, and on top of that, no one was able to know about this pre-release, at least not with any degree of concrete certainty, because the review copies were very pointedly given to specific outlets and fans on certain platforms, utilizing only the Epic Game Store and the PC version, so the community at large was effectively kept in the dark. These are all very real concerns, but many will be wondering what about the gameplay, so let's get into that. When it ran smooth, some of the time, the gameplay was very good. As I said earlier, it is a lockstep replication of Borderlands 2 for the most part, but the movement, the combat, the mechanics in general felt very, very good. I was distinctly excited to get my first legendary gun. I enjoyed finding upgrades and expanding my arsenal, but a lot of that enjoyment was curbed by the necessity of using the problematic areas. For instance, the UI is so laggy and unresponsive that I never wanted to open a menu. However, with only a small number of inventory slots, I had to frequently open the menu to sort things, since loot is far more abundant than what you can carry. In terms of characters, the current roster seems to be well crafted. I am playing as Amara at the moment, with some interesting ideas on how to build out her ability kit, as well as a clear sense of motivation to unlock further power upgrades and expand my own arsenal. However, since I am fairly confident that the enjoyment accelerates at later levels when more ability points have been slotted, etc., and when valuable gear is becoming more common, I found myself wanting to accelerate through the early missions. This is not comfortable to do. Here is where we again circle back to the idea of innovation versus continuity. Borderlands 3, much like Borderlands 2, though it has been a long time since I played Borderlands 2, if we are being totally honest here, but regardless, much like its predecessor, the game has strong level bracketing. If you are even a few levels outside of the intended bracket for a mission, which is an exceedingly compressed bracket I might add, and by a few levels I mean even just 3 or 4 maximum, if you are under-leveled, progression is painful, Enemies are so bullet spongy, depending on what arsenal you have as well, that you may be even taking 3 or 4 magazines to down a single tankier foe. On top of this, you don't carry all that much ammunition, so when enemies are not dying quickly, at least with my early build, character, and loadout, which was also not that early, I played many hours yesterday, it means that you are stuck running around the map frantically searching for tiny little breadcrumbs of ammo, because not that much drops from crates or enemies, etc., and it's really awful. This is much more comfortable at the proper relative power level, and a non-issue if you fight things 1 or 2 levels below you, but for anyone accelerating through the main missions, you will be faced with near mandatory side questing expeditions to alleviate the strain of bullet spongy enemies. To some, this seems reasonable and obvious, but to others, it is an annoyance. I'll let everyone decide for themselves, but since there is a clear emphasis placed on post-campaign content, accelerating through those missions might be appealing to a large number of gamers, and it's not comfortable to do. Now, for boss fights, there has been some serious enjoyment thus far, at least for me. If you lack some strong burst damage potential and the boss outlevels you, well, then it's a slog like no other and it's really horrible. But if you are on curve, have a few good weapons, and are able to hold your own with a decent amount of regen and survivability, the unique mechanical design of the encounters, at least for the first half dozen or so that I've faced so far, they are excellent. There is nothing quite like the loot explosion you get from a Borderlands boss, and Borderlands 3 is not disappointing in that regard. Since the boss fights are such highlights, another factor I ran into was the desire to accelerate through the trash mobs and find more of them. But this again is where the game reverts to a stagnated and outdated format where you are often retreading ground with the same bullet spongy enemies in the way. And sometimes the simple process of getting through one zone of wave-based counterattack or assault can take much longer than is comfortable. I haven't played very much co-op yet, but from what I did explore, there is a good ping system, an appealing set of options for instanced or free-for-all looting, which is actually a very big deal, and I'm looking forward to playing additional co-op for the remainder of the campaign, since it does definitely add to the enjoyment in a lot of circumstances. Now, on the subject of side missions and side content in general, the game does a very good job of making that side content unique and rewarding. Since it is essentially a requirement that you do this side material in order to not bash your head against a wall with the main campaign, it is very good that the missions are well designed. Some of my favorite boss fights and missions were actually lengthy side areas that expand outward from the main questline and gave not only adequate or exceptional rewards, but were nearly indistinguishable from the main story in terms of unique craftsmanship. In an age where kill or fetch quests are all too common in a lot of games, with the majority of side content clearly being an afterthought in other titles, this was a praiseworthy thing seeing the well-rounded approach, especially because a lot of side content is effectively mandatory or else you might face teeth-pulling balancing issues, so I was very happy about this. For weapons, it's hard to say anything other than just wow. The randomization of attributes, the manufacturers, the entire system in general coalesces to craft a gear system that achieves what every looter shooter should aspire to create. The gear is the motivation. It is the carrot and the stick, and it is done very well here. Just like the previous game, that was kind of an inevitability, honestly, so that should be mentioned. With that said, however, since the level bracketing is so strong, it felt somewhat disappointing when I would get a powerful and rare weapon, only to have that weapon really not be a main focus in how strong I was during combat. For a game built around guns, the guns often feel like they play second fiddle to the simplicity of how high your level is, with that being the primary function of how strong your character then becomes, which detracts from one of the game's strongest features in my opinion. The sound design and weapon feedback, however, is quite good, so whatever annoyance I may feel when a legendary high-powered gun just fizzles and barely adds any power to my character, at a bare minimum, at least it feels badass to shoot. The game now features item trading, which leads to the inevitable exploitation that comes with player ability to give gear to one another. Not sure how that will go, honestly, but by and large, what I have played I mostly enjoyed. Right up until I was just shooting spitballs at campaign enemies and desperately searching for ammo the entire time. The game certainly deserves higher than whatever it is currently at on Metacritic, at least the user score, since that user score is largely a function of disconnected frustration. But it also, beyond any shadow of a doubt, does not deserve a 95 or a 90, like what many mainstream outlets are awarding right now. A broken technical launch, shady review copy practices, and a mishmash of other less than ideal circumstances, combined with the hit or miss approach of sticking meticulously to the format of its precursor that launched many years ago, leads me to encourage skepticism for Borderlands 3 at this current juncture. If you know that you just want more Borderlands 2, then definitely grab it. It will be worth it. But if you wanted the game to be pushed further, or you don't want to be enduring the Epic Game Store, or the terrible UI, or the awful DRM systems, or whatever else, I would encourage you to wait a little bit, at least a small amount of time, and see how it shapes up with a few patches, or maybe even a bit of future DLC content. Keep in mind, this is not my official review. The official review can't happen until I have played the endgame, explored more of the material, but with a game this large, I thought it better to publish a first impressions video sooner rather than later. If you want to support, there are links down below, merch, Patreon, that kind of thing. I'll also be live streaming Borderlands 3 on YouTube today, and also a great deal more in the near future if you want to catch a broadcast, but I'll cut it there and stop rambling. As always, thank you all for watching, and have a nice night.